everyone. My name is Janos Martenyi, and this is a new episode of My Pride, My Story. My guest today is John O'Brien, an activist from the Irish Fetish community, and he's going to tell us about his late coming out. John, what took you so long?
I'm a very late developer, actually, believe it or not. I'm 57 at the moment. I know that's really hard to believe. Obviously, I'm Irish, so it's very much a Catholic country. So that would be one of my experiences in the past. Also, my parents were quite elderly. I mean, when I was born, my dad was 53. So I had that whole thing of having the older parents and not really experiencing the scene. I don't think I actually came out to anybody until about in my late 30s, around 2001. And by that stage, my parents had passed on, so it was a lot easier. I think I met my first guy in April 2001. Yes. And then after that, I started to come out to a couple of friends. But very recently, back in 2011, I had a stroke. So that made me realize that there are less years ahead than there are behind. So I've started to come out to a lot of friends. I came out to a lot of people I worked with and that kind of thing, because it was like, what's the point of keeping it a secret? And I think if you're talking to other fetishists, they'll say, if you're gay and a fetishist, you have to come out twice. Once as gay and once as into fetish. And I'm sure you'll find that. And even now I find it easier to come out to people about the fetish side. A lot of my friends would know, my sister, who's my only living relative, knows. Some of the people I work with know, that kind of thing. Obviously, they're all very curious as to what it is. So they don't tell me what they do in the bedroom. So I don't bother telling them too much about what I do either. So I'd say I came out to my sister in about 2003. And at that stage, I was 40.
My question is, did you come out for yourself before, or was it a fight inside of you all the time?
I've always been interested in, obviously from a fetish point of view, I've always been interested in rubber, and particularly I have a thing for rubber boots. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm really into rubber boots. And I would always, if I saw people, it was only guys in rubber boots I was interested in, okay? So maybe that should have told me something. So yes, I think I knew, but I didn't really admit it to myself for a long time. And I remember when I was looking after my mum when she was quite ill, the internet saved me. We're talking about the early 90s. And I know you're far too young to remember dial-up, and I'd be going into these sites about rubber boots. And if you can imagine, the boots are the last thing you're going to see. So you're watching the screen go, and you go, oh God, and it takes about half an hour before you see it. So I kind of knew at that stage that I was gay, but I'd never done anything about it. I had a lot of friends who possibly suspected. I would have been bullied a lot at school as well. Possibly, I don't know, my voice can be quite high-pitched. I probably am a little bit camp, yeah. So I would have been bullied quite a bit. So that kind of forced it maybe a little bit more internal, that I wouldn't admit it. But I think eventually, once I was on my own and I realized that, I was going to have to do something and admit it to myself, it became so much easier. And of course, once I met the first guy, got a lot more easier, and then it just went on from there. But I'd say, again, I don't want to keep going on about the whole Irish thing, because, my God, we've really come a long way in the last 20 years. But if you think it was only legalized, homosexuality was only legalized in Ireland in 1993. So we've come a long way since then. But yes, I guess I always knew from the time I was maybe 11 or 12, but I never admitted it until probably my late 20s, early 30s.
Do you think your late awakening has anything to do with religion or with your conservative parents?
I think it's to do with both, yes. My parents, as I say, were quite elderly, so they were quite religious. And then you've got my early school, my primary school, I don't know what you would call it. My primary school was in what we call the Christian Brothers, the religious order. So they were very much, God, sex is a sin, everything's a sin, that kind of thing. So that would have been always in the back of my mind. And then my mother was quite religious, and I would go to mass every Sunday and all that kind of thing. Obviously, I mean, it's interesting because I still do have a belief in God, but it's my own belief rather than any kind of institutional thing, But I'd say my parents being how they were, and probably just because I am quite reserved myself at times. I think that's my parents, the religion, and then just my own personality kept me locked in the closet for quite a while.
You mentioned that your parents passed away quite early.
For me, I was looking after them for a long time. I mean, they were quite, as I said, my dad was 53 when I was born, and he died in 1994. And then my mum got sick the next month, and she lived for a year afterwards at home on oxygen 16 hours a day. So even if I did want to do anything about how I was feeling, there wasn't much of a chance, you know, that kind of way, because I was primary carer for both of them. So that kind of held me back a little bit, and which is why I say the internet was a great resource to let me know that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people feel the same. You feel that you're the weirdest person in the world. I mean, how could you be into rubber boots and rubber and leather and bondage and all this? And obviously you're the only person in the world who's into this, you know? And it's only when you discover the internet, you think, oh my God, I'm actually quite boring. There are guys out there into a lot worse than I am. And notice I say worse because it's in your head that anything different is deviant, you know? And that's something we have to overcome. And it took me a long time to overcome that.
I remember those times. You mentioned that since 1993, homosexuality was not anymore a sin in Ireland.
It wasn't illegal anymore. It's still a sin, I'm afraid. So I didn't, as I say, I didn't meet my first person. My first guy I met was 2001. So at that stage it was legal, and there was no kind of issue with it. It's always going to be a sin in the eyes of the church, as you know, Janos. But that I've just, you know, I've kind of accepted now that, you know, and again, I'm not pushing anything, but if God created me, he created me who I am. So, you know, it's his responsibility. If he's not happy, that's just tough, you know.
I absolutely understand you. I went to a religious high school, religious university, and what I learned that God is love. And if God wants to change us, he could have changed us to hetero, but he wants the way how we are.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because I've said so many times, you know, when you have all these Bible bashing people, there are only 3 words in the Bible to me that mean anything, and that's God is love. That's all. And everything else flows out of that, you know. So that's what I believe and feel anyway. So.
You know, you're not the first one during these interviews who are mentioning religion and how religion is holding us back for being who we are, and how politics is using religion to hold us back.
And it's fascinating for me to see, because I must tell you the story I tell about people. When I was 4, I started school at 4, and I tell people the story of this nun that we had. And she came into the class with the candle and asked anybody, would we hold our finger in the candle? And she told us that that's not an iota of what it will be like in the fires of hell, you know. So you've got that whole thing, you know, from that age, you know. And it's interesting because we kind of moved on for a while and we had a lot more liberalism, and now we seem to be coming back to the whole right wing with Brazil, with America, with you know, the what do they call them, the alt-right, and it's like there's nothing new under the sun. It's going so right again now, and I worry about, you know, when you see the things in Chechnya and in Russia. I don't know. I mean, I would hope that people, in general, people are better, but their leaders seem to be, you know, the worst thing there is at the moment, and I don't know what we can do about that. It's just try and normalize who we are, and that's one of the reasons I agreed to do the interview, is that I'm an ordinary guy. I'm not out to convert anybody to homosexuality or anything like that, and I think the more we can be seen to be normal, even with what we do, is, you know. So I do like when I go. That's one of the reasons I was very late getting involved with Pride. I never had been to a Pride event, and then I got involved with Geared Ireland, which was one of the fetish groups here, and still is. And they were joining Pride in 2014, and I really wanted to go, but I had to go to the UK to visit family. So the next year I made sure that I took part, and I had such a good time that I've marched with either them or the Dublin Bears, which are another group I'm involved with, every year since. And I'm really disappointed it's been cancelled this year. So we're trying to sort out some kind of virtual Pride, but I'm not sure how that will work, but we'll see.
And how old were you at your first Pride?
Gosh, let me see. I need a calculator. I was 52.
Oh.
Yes.
And what were you expecting, and what was the reality?
I wasn't sure what to expect really, because I suppose at that stage, I mean, I had been to a lot of fetish events before that, and it's really easy going to fetish events when they're not in your own country, because there's a freedom with not, you know, Ireland is very small. I know, I'm sure you've heard the expression 6 degrees of separation, where somebody knows somebody who knows something. In Ireland, we say it's 3 degrees of separation. So I never had a problem being in gear and going to different events abroad. So this would have been probably my first, public event in gear. And I wasn't sure what to expect, but God, it was so good. And people were so supportive. And I mean, obviously the people marching were really supportive, but the spectators were amazing, and a couple of the guys had the mirror caps on, and the women, particularly women, were coming over and trying it on and getting photographs taken with them. And the cheers, obviously everybody thinks this, but I thought whenever we passed a group of people, the cheers seemed to go up. It was, maybe they all remember Village People and YMCA, I don't know, but we got an awful lot of support from the spectators, and it was such a joy and such an uplift from that. I've been every year since. So yeah. So better late than never, I suppose.
You mentioned your second coming out as a fetish person. And as your coming out was already a late coming out, was it at the same time with your fetish coming out?
It came a little bit later. Because, I mean, initially it was easy enough to admit. I started with my sister and then with family, admitting that I was gay. And I mean, I'm sure they suspected at this stage, but anyway. And then I was having a lot of fun with somebody, and I was thinking, I don't know if anything's going to develop out of it or anything, but I think I'll just say it to my sister. So I started with my sister, and she was fine. She was like, well, again, I don't tell you what I get up to in the bedroom. What's the problem? So then I started talking to other people. And then when I was getting involved in Pride, I wanted people to know. Like, look, this is what I'm into. There's quite a good fetish scene in Ireland. I had friends coming over to visit. I have quite a small house, but I have a lot of people to stay when there's different fetish events on and that kind of stuff. So in the end, I didn't want to keep it a secret. I wanted people to know about it, and that it's a big interest with me, and that we have a great fetish scene in Ireland, and that I'm very much a part of it, and I love it. So I therefore didn't feel the need to keep it a secret anymore.
Did you have any bad reactions from friends or colleagues or someone who became distant from you?
I think so. A couple of people were like, "Oh, I don't really understand all that thing. I'd rather not talk about it." And I said, "Okay, fine. That's your choice. I'm not going to shove it in your face." But no, mostly positive reactions, and then you get like some of my straight friends. Some of my best friends are women, I have to admit, sorry. But they'd be really interested. Like, and what do they wear? And what happens? And what do you do at these events? And it's that kind of thing. And then you've got other friends who, when anything happens on the gay scene, they come to me and say, so what happened there? Like, I should know if anything's happened in Brazil or anything. I have a hotline, and because I'm gay, I must know all about it. So you get that of it. But no, I have to say it's been very positive, the reaction, and maybe people say, God, he's a lot more interesting than he looks. I don't know.
You mentioned that from 1993, homosexuality was not anymore illegal in Ireland. And since that, Ireland changed a lot. And we have to talk about it because when I was for 3 years ago in Ireland on a fetish event, it stays in my head that you don't really have a man-exclusive gay bars.
Well, we have gay bars. We don't have fetish bar, but we do have gay bars, or bars that would be considered gay bars. Like, say, the George would be one of the oldest gay bars in Ireland. You have the Panty Bar. You used to have the Front Lounge, it's now called Street 66, but I think that's more gay friendly. I think, again, I don't know whether it's a legal thing or not, but a lot of the gay bars here tend to attract hen parties, a hen party where if a girl's getting married, they have a party. And then they don't seem to have a rule where you can just make it men only. There are very few bars. I don't think there's any bar that are men only here. And I'm open to correction on that. But I know like in the George, for instance, there's a particular bar that a lot of, how will I put this? A lot of men of my generation go to, and it's called Jurassic, as in for the dinosaurs, you understand? So that's basically men only, because very few women would go to that. But then the next door bar, if you go on the Sunday night for bingo, there's everybody, you know, there's no distinction, but it is considered a gay bar, but everybody goes.
As far as I know, in Irish law, there's no permitted any kind of discrimination.
You're probably right, yes.
It stayed very much in my head because it was the first time that I saw that in Europe. And on the other hand, it also was a little bit strange because it stopped the party a little bit to get more sexual.
I think that that party can be men only, but I think because it was part of Leather Pride, it was decided to open it to anybody. But because we had booked that venue downstairs, we could make it men only. But because it was part of Leather Pride, we wanted to make sure we included everybody. So that's my memory of it anyway. I remember your visit all right. it was a good time. Yeah.
Nowadays, prides become more a commercial event, not a riot anymore. Do you think there's still something to fight for?
It's difficult. I think there have to be elements of both. You know, because I know last year, when we went last year, it was really good because they had all the community groups first. So that kind of went through, and then they had all the commercial afterwards, which I think is the way it should be, you know, because the community group should be leading the way. I think we can have an element of both, because obviously Pride is such a, I mean, at the moment, they reckon that Pride in Ireland is second only to St. Patrick's Day Parade, which is a huge thing. So, so I've just knocked you off there. So hopefully it will continue in that vein. But I do think you can be part of Pride and still have your poster, you know, support Chechnya, support Rainbow Railroad, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure that I agree with just having Pride as a total protest. I know it began as a protest, and it can still have elements of protest to it, certainly. But in reality, you know, if companies are willing to pay and have a float, let them on. But as long as the money they give for that is used for community events and for promoting, you know, like say the Chechnya 100 campaign, or any of those campaigns that need funds, I would agree with them having both. But again, let the community lead the way.
And at the moment, what is the most important issue in Ireland? For what has the Irish LGBTQ plus community has to fight for?
I know there are still a lot of gender issues. I know there is a gender recognition bill, but I believe it doesn't go far enough. It's not something I've studied again, but I know that there are some issues with gender recognition. There are a couple of issues to do with adoptive parents, with same-sex couples and adoption. But again, I haven't looked into it in any great detail, but that is something at the moment. And it's always the same. We sometimes feel, oh, we've got this, that's enough, let's leave it there. But I think we should continue, you know, and I think the saying that you see is, equal rights for me doesn't diminish rights for you. And I think that's an important thing, because I think some people can think, oh, they can vote now and they can get married, what more do they want, kind of thing, you know. So I think we should never lose sight of what else is needed. And also, and I think it's part of this whole swing to the right, not so much here, but in some parts of the world there have been homophobic attacks. And I think we need to look at that, because sometimes you don't need to scratch the surface for prejudice to raise its ugly head, you know. One of the things I would be fighting for, and again, I mean, we all look after our own. One of the things I think we don't have, and I don't know if it's an issue in Spain, we don't have any care homes. Care homes have come into the headlights with this whole COVID thing, but we don't have any specific LGBT care homes. And I read somewhere recently that 75% of gay people go back into the closet when they are admitted to a care home, because the staff there may not be accepting of their lifestyle. And I think that's something we need to look at.
Again, in parentheses, can you imagine a care home full of gay guys bitching with all the nurses?
You've started an idea there now, Janos.
I think it's a very good business opportunity. And on the other hand, like the song says, sooner or later we all sleep alone.
Yes, yes.
And you know, Sadly, most of us has no children or someone who would take care of us when we get older.
No, which to me is ironic since I looked after so many people. Yeah, it's something I don't think about really, because I mean I have a sister and I have two nephews, but they live in the UK, and I wouldn't ever expect them to look after me. And I don't have a partner, and I don't know if I ever will at this stage. So yeah, it's kind of, what do you want at the end of it all? And I mean, I would like there to be somewhere that you could go and be accepted. But I suppose at the end of the day, it's what you do for yourself too. I know when I was in the hospital, I was in the hospital for about 5 or 6 weeks after the aneurysm, and there were a lot of, I never talked about being gay or anything. So there were a lot of different staff, and I'm sure there were some of the staff who were gay as well. But again, it's something I suppose as the years go on, I'll have to think more about, but not at the moment.
If you could be 14, 15 again, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
Hmm. Again, I don't want to be so cliched about it, but it's just to say it gets better. Now, see, I'm upsetting myself now. Yeah, it gets better, and it's never going to be as bad as you think. And then trust people, and people are generally, people can be very kind. They can be very cruel too, but people can be very kind if you find the right people. I think that's all the advice I give. And I wouldn't change anything. I mean, everything that's happened, the good and the bad, has made me who I am. So I wouldn't change it. But I just like to say, look, it gets better. It's not going to be as bad as you think. Just be yourself.